Okay, all right, we're just gonna push through. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Marc Brown. I'm a loanaholic.
Hi, Mark.
Y'all know the drill, come on. So one of the things that I'm gonna be talking to you guys about today is the sexy title, how to get 100% financing. But what we're gonna really do is go into a deep dive on how financing works in general, because one of the most frustrating things for me as a loan professional is when I talk to somebody on the phone and they're like, hey, I wanted to talk to you, I'm ready to get my financing, and I just wanna know how this works. And I'm like, how loans work? It's busy season. I don't really have time for all that, you know. I gotta limit my phone calls to people that are buying a house right now. So one of the things that we try to do here with BTS is we want to create an environment where everyone can learn how these processes work, get good information, and I'm hoping you'll use me because I'm giving you the game for free. But if you don't, you'll still be able to function in the marketplace and not be out there in the world. Is that fair? So what I'm going to do is go over things that I think are really important for everybody to know, and then you guys are going to have a ton of questions, and I want you to write those questions down and put them in the parking lot. And then at the end, I'm going to open up for a whole lot of Q&A, and I'm sure you guys are going to bombard me and rush me with some questions afterwards because you don't feel comfortable asking them in front of a room full of strangers. But we're going to try to use that as much as possible to help everyone learn. And I've had a lot of these conversations, so I'm pretty good at filling in the gaps from the jump. Is that fair? Yes. Awesome. So one of the things that I want to talk about today is how loans work. You know, how do you get other people's money so that you can use that and leverage it to buy real estate? That's like pretty important, right? So has anyone in here, by the show of hands, bought a house with other people's money? You've taken out a loan, gotten a mortgage? Way up, okay? Lots of people. There's some people that have not. So I'm going to tailor the first part of this talk for the people who have not, and then I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit for the people who have to learn how this stuff works. Is that fair? All right, so when I'm trying to get a loan to buy real estate and I'm asking someone else for money, what are the things that they're looking for from me? They want to know whether or not I'm someone who's going to pay them back the money. So they check that by looking at my credit score maybe, right? If you go to a bank or a mortgage lender, they're going to look at your credit score to see your history of paying other people back on time. They're going to look at my income so they can determine my ability to repay the loan, right? They're also going to look at the asset that I'm purchasing and getting the loan against. So they want to make sure that if I'm buying a house for $200,000, it's actually worth $200,000, right? And if you're getting an investment purchase, one of the other things that they may be looking at is whether or not the investment itself is going to support the debt payment that's attached to that. Right? These are all the factors that we're looking at. That's really a fancy way of saying they want to know if they can trust me, right? Can I trust you to pay me this money back on time? What's your history of paying other people back on time? Can I trust you to pay me this money back on time? Are you making enough money to afford this monthly payment, right? So anyone who's going through that process or is going through that process right now, because it's a popular time of the year to buy houses, you've already had some of these questions, right? You call up to get a loan application done by a loan officer. They're asking you like the most intimate financial questions that you've ever been asked in your life. Why is that, right? They want to know all about you. Hey, where do you work? How long have you been working there? Where were you working before that? Where do you live? How long have you been living there? Where were you living before that? What's your income? You get paid hourly or salary? Same amount every month? Same amount every week? Oh, okay. These are the questions that we have to ask as loan professionals, because when the underwriter is reviewing the file, they want to know with confidence, hey, this person's going to be able to pay us back. And if they're not, then we're not giving them the loan because that's not a good bet, right? Now, what's the maximum leverage that someone can get when they're buying a house to live in? If I'm getting an FHA loan, the maximum loan to value ratio, so maximum leverage is 96.5%. That means you're responsible for putting down 3.5%. The lender's giving you the rest. There is some upfront mortgage insurance, yada, yada, yada. There's some other expenses associated with getting the loan. But for all intents and purposes, they're giving you 96.5% leverage. If I'm getting a conventional loan, depending on where I'm buying, right now, the city of Philadelphia has a lot of areas that are considered up and coming, some more coming than up. And you can go all the way up to 97% of the purchase price. Standard is 3 to 5% down. If someone wants to get a little bit more aggressive, they can obviously make a larger down payment. That just means that you're a better risk for the lender, right? If I'm buying an investment property and I want to get a conventional loan, my minimum down payment, if I'm not going to be living in the house, is 85% for a single family. And if it's a multi-unit property, 75%. Now, why is that? Why would somebody ask me to put more money down if I'm not going to be living in the house? Because if I don't make the payments, I'm not going to be homeless. I don't have to get out. Whoever's living in there has to get out when the bank takes it back or when the lender takes it back. But I don't have to get out. And because of that, they want to see more financial skin in the game from me. Because it's a lot less likely that I'm going to default or allow that payment not to be made if I had to put 25% down than if I put, say, 3 or 5 or 3.5% down, right? So how do we get to 100% financing? Now, when you're looking at a property to evaluate as a potential investment, a lot of people should know this, but if you don't, because maybe you're new to BTS or you haven't been watching the new members videos, you want to look at something called the 65% rule. The 65% rule states that my purchase and renovation cost for a potential value add, that's either a property that I'm going to be buying, fixing up and selling for a profit, or buying, fixing up, and I'm going to retain it as a rental property, and I'm maybe getting some long-term financing to take me out of it, is no more than 65% of what the property's value is going to be after I make the improvements. So again, my purchase and rehab costs are less than or equal to 65%. I think I did that right, I don't know, but this other way? Okay. Just going to push through? Okay. Oh, okay, all right. Well, you know, that's all right. I did good in algebra, but you know, that was a long time ago. So when you're looking at whether or not a deal makes sense and you're evaluating per the 65% rule, really easy math. What's the challenge right now in a city like Philadelphia with the 65% rule? Not a lot of these deals running around, right? Nicole made an announcement before I started and said, hey, who here has any wholesale deals? I bet you some people had deals, they was embarrassed to put them out there because it didn't look like this, right? So you go in certain rooms, you can get away with that. Maybe you're dealing with out-of-state investors, you can get away with that. If you're dealing with somebody who's looking at a lot of deals and they have a set number, they're not willing to go above, it's going to be a little bit harder to find these. Now, the beautiful part is, if you don't have all of the money, I can help you, right? So what I'm going to teach you guys is, A, how to use other people's money through hard money loans, bridge loans, private loans, whatever you want to call it, to take down investment purchases. And also at some point, because you have a track record, you're going to be able to go and find your own financing where you don't have to ask somebody to appraise the property and write you a check or send you a wire. You just have the money sitting in the bank because maybe you raise your own funds, right? So when we're looking at the 65% rule, just got really loud real quick. When we're looking at the 65% rule, burn this into your brains. The purchase and rehab costs are less than or equal to 65% of the property's after repair value, ARV. And for those of you who are maybe not learning the way that I learn, because I write everything out like this, I have some handouts. I just don't have them with me. And I'm going to send those to anybody if you send an email to info@BTS Funding. Because some people who have never been through the purchase process, I look at closing documents and loan documents all day long. This stuff may be really scary and new to you. I'm going to give you everything I got so you can kind of have that to cheat a little bit as you're going through the process and get familiar with this, so you know what this paperwork looks like when you're going through the loan process. Info at BTS Funding. All right, so if I'm buying a property and my goal is to flip it, that seems to be really popular nowadays, even though I feel like the market's going to crash soon because the loan programs that we're offering are ridiculous. Have some friends in the back that told me that they have a loan program where someone only has to show up with 2 months bank statements and profit and loss statement for their business and they can get a loan. They don't have to show any income documentation. That scares me a little bit. But when you're able to evaluate deals, it doesn't matter if it's an up market, down market, left market, right market, right? You know what your numbers are. So if you're doing a flip, you know that if I put out this much money for the purchase and rehab, then even if I get some surprises during the process, it takes me longer to sell the property than I was expecting, I gotta maybe drop the price a little bit more than I wanted it to be competitive and move it quickly on the retail market, I'm gonna be okay, right? So what does it look like if I'm buying a property for those of us who have never done that? If I'm buying a property for, let's say, $100,000, and it needs $50,000 worth of work, and the property is going to sell for $250,000. By show of hands, who would take this deal as a rehabber? Show of hands, who would take this deal as a rehabber? I'm a little bit nervous, there's not more hands going up. As a rehabber, not you personally, as a rehabber, I'm flipping houses for profit, who would take this deal? Raise your hands. Okay, all right, you're making me nervous, people. So if I'm buying this with my own cash, and I'm doing everything with my own cash, how much money do I need to buy a property for $100,000 and rehab it for $50,000? 160, 165, right? You have closing costs. In Philadelphia County, what's the transfer tax? Anybody? What's the transfer tax? 4.278%, right? So that means if I'm responsible for half of that as the buyer, I'm paying 2.139. That's 2139 right on top. How you doing? Right? What are the other costs associated with buying a property that I'm going to be making renovation improvements to? What's that, young man? Title insurance, right? No one, you want to make sure that there's no liens against the property. You may get a home inspection, right? You may get an appraisal done to determine the value, even if you were buying it with your own cash just to check your numbers. If you have people working in the property while you're working on it, what do they need? Permits, right? Are the tools powering themselves through osmosis? You got to pay PICO, right? So you have holding costs that are associated with that are over and above your hard costs of purchase and renovation for materials and labor. So if I'm using my own money, as someone said, maybe I'm at 160, 165, right? Using my own cash. That's daunting for somebody who doesn't have $165,000. That would be a barrier to entry, is what we call that, right? I don't have $165,000. Guess I'm not flipping houses. Sorry, right? So let me show you how you can use other people's money and get it done with a fraction of that. Now, this same property that you're buying for $100,000, and it's a great deal because it needs $50,000 worth of work, and then it's going to sell for $250,000. And if somebody comes across one of these deals and you don't slide it to me and you don't buy it yourself, we're going to have a little bit of a tussle. So I got a $100,000 purchase, $50,000 in repairs. We'll go ahead and give you 100% of the money. What are your closing costs associated with buying the house? Transfer tax. If you're only paying the buyer's side, that's $21.39. Maybe you have to pay the seller back taxes prorated for the year because they already paid for the taxes for 2019. Let's say the taxes are $2,500. Maybe you're paying them half that, round numbers. Title insurance. What's title insurance on a property this size, John? John? $800? Anything else I'm missing?
Marketing.
What's that?
Marketing.
Marketing? Marketing to buy the property?
No, to actually find investors that purchase the property.
Okay, so you're saying maybe if you're sourcing the deal yourself as an investor, or if you're a wholesaler and you decide you want to take down your first deal, maybe you had to send out some mailers. Who knows what that costs? $1,500, right? So your out-of-pocket expenses are 18, 3, let's say 7, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair? I'm rounding up because there's some stuff in there that I missed. Work with me, Carla. So if you're getting financing, all we're looking for, if you needed a loan for $150,000 because you are going to sell the property for $250,000, and we can verify that the property would in fact sell for $250,000 by performing an after repair value inspection. So the way that we do that is you put together a scope of work, write that down, scope of work, rehab estimate, write that down. The scope of work is going to outline in detail what you're going to be doing to the property. Now, typically when you get an appraisal done, it's a third-party inspection to confirm the value of a property that you're getting a loan against, or if you just want it for your own, peace of mind, if you were buying the property cash. When you're getting one of these types of loans, a rehab loan, you're getting a subject to inspection done. Subject to inspection says, this property will be worth X, subject to you doing Y. What is Y? Y is the scope of work. What repairs and what improvements am I making to the property? Right? And then if I do all of that, this is what properties in the area have sold for. That look like this. They're going to be in this condition, newly rehabbed. Everything's nice and pretty. If you have a grandma house, nobody's touched it in 15 years, made any upgrades to it, right? This would be a perfect opportunity for you to go in there and get busy. So if we're giving you 100% of the purchase funds, you're only responsible for the closing costs, and then our lender fee, which would probably be 3%. That's $4,500. So again, we're using round numbers. We're now at less than $12,000 out of pocket, right? What would you prefer? $100,000 plus closing costs, or $12,000 plus closing costs? Including all your closing costs. Not all at the same time, people. Which one? Okay, right. And so now, let's say I was saving and I put my money together with my brother, and we got our money together, and I got $50,000 saved up between me and my brother, and we couldn't take down a $165,000 project by ourselves with our own cash, but we just bought this $100,000 property with 12 grand out of pocket. Major kid, right? And then the $50,000 that we've set aside for the renovations, no lender in their right mind is going to advance you that money at closing, because if you decide not to pay, now they have a property that's worth $100,000 that they gave you $150,000 for. That's just not good math, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to break that money up, and they're going to disperse it to you as a reimbursement. So you do some of the work, pay for materials and labor, they send an inspector out to the property. Hey, looks like you did everything you said you were going to do in your scope of work. Here's some of your money. They go back home, you go in there, you guys do some more work, they send somebody else out. Hey, looks like you did that. Okay, here's some more of your money, wire it to your account. And then you go back home, and then now you finish the property. It's in market-ready condition for you to either flip it, sell it to a retail buyer, or if the plan was to hold on to it as an investment property, it's now in rent-ready condition. You can either get long-term financing to get up out of there, or if you did do this with your own money and maybe you're independently wealthy, you could pay off that loan. And now they give you the rest of the money and you can live your best life. At any given time during that process, if you had a $50,000 rehab budget, let's say you had a $20,000 outlay at any given time plus your $12,000 that you brought to closing. You didn't even use all the money in your account. What are the major costs that are associated with real estate investing? If I'm a buy-in hold investor, but I want to employ the BRRRR strategy, or I'm a rehabber and I'm buying properties to fix them up. You have the cost of inventory, which is the properties. You have the cost of materials and labor. And if you're using other people's money, you have the carrying costs associated with getting financing. Now, out of these three things, what costs the most, typically? Property, right? Next up, what costs the most between these two? Materials and labor. What's the least expensive out of these expenses? Carrying costs, right? What do you think the first question is that people ask me when they call me up and ask me about hard money loans, typically? What are your interest rates? What are your interest rates? How much does this cost? I mean, does it matter? If you're paying $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 premium because all your deals are sourced through wholesalers that are marking up the price, and they're daisy chaining it to other wholesalers and they're marking up the price, does my financing cost really matter? You're getting your materials for too much, your inventory for too much anyway. If you're paying the retail prices at Lowe's and Home Depot for materials because you can only do one project at a time, so they treat you like the little brother rehabber, is that my fault? So if you can do more projects because you're using other people's money, what can get cheaper? You're doing more deals. People that are sourcing deals, real estate agents who work with investors and wholesalers, they know that you're a serious player. They start sending you deals first. You get first crack at them, right? You get them before everybody else gets a hold of them and there's a bidding war. They just call you first. Look, I know you close quick. I know you're serious. We're not going to have any issues. I want to sell you the property. I'll give you first right of refusal. That's where you want to get to, right? For materials and labor, if you're doing 5 projects and you go down to a plumbing supply place or a tile place or the cabinet store, are you going to get a better price or a worse price than the person who's only doing 1 at a time? It makes sense, right? So if you have a goal to grow your business as a real estate investor, you have to at some point learn how to leverage other people. That could be other people's time and energy by getting employees to do the things that are beneath your pay grade at some point because you found other tasks that are more worthwhile, like sourcing good deals and getting your materials for cheaper, and maybe even sourcing your money and not having to worry about it being a full-time job for you to chase down the best deal because you have a trusted financial professional. Or sourcing other people's money, leveraging other people's money, right? I want everybody to write this down or record this, whatever's easiest for you. I'm going to give you the game. I may cost myself some clients right now. Hey guys, my real estate investing business is going great. In fact, I'm getting so many deals, I can't take them down with my own money. I'm allowing other people to come in and invest with me. Do you know anybody who's looking to earn above average returns by investing in real estate? Listen, I'm giving you full game. You know what I mean? You got to soak it up however you can get it, right? My real estate investing business is going crazy. I'm getting so many deals, I can't take them down with my own resources. I'm allowing other people to come in and invest with me. Do you know anybody who's looking to earn above average returns by investing in real estate? Now, if I have $10, $10,000, or $100,000 in the bank, that statement could be true. Why is that? If I got $10, I can't take down no deals. So every deal that comes across my desk, I need help, right? If I got 100,000 and I'm getting 10 deals a day, hey, I still need help, right? Now, when you say that to somebody, you can't say it with thirst, right? You got to be completely prepared that they're not your person. But you say it to the people that you know either A, have access to the financial resources, or they know people that do. And you say, hey, I know you got a lot going on, not you, but I'm sure you know some other people that are looking to earn above average return. I mean, what's a 9-month CD getting you right now? 3%? Most of my investors, when they come on projects, I'm getting them between 6 and 8%. I mean, it's great. And it's secured by real estate. So if for some crazy reason I didn't pay them back, they could just take the property and sell it and get all their money back plus some. So if you guys get in the habit of learning how to source your inventory for the best possible price, that's building strong relationships, that's networking, being in rooms like this one, BTS, right? There's a lot of other networking clubs in this city that talk about real estate. You can start getting your properties for the cheap. Looking at deals, evaluating what fair prices are, what properties are selling for on the market if you're looking to do rehabs and sell properties. If you're a buy and hold investor and you want to employ the BRRRR strategy, does everybody know what the BRRRR strategy is? No? Does anybody not know what the BRRRR strategy is? Okay, everybody just knows it by heart? Solid. BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent it, refinance it, and run it back, right? That's how people invest in real estate and continue investing in real estate when they're not rich already. Because if I buy a property because I'm making oodles of money, it's one of my goals in life, for $400,000, and I'm just getting a regular loan, the property's cash flowing strong, it's got 3 units, they're all renting for $1,800 a piece. Beautiful cap rate, right? So minimum $80,000 plus my closing costs. Maybe 25% depending on the type of funding that I'm getting. And there's investors that do this. They make a ton of money. They don't need to live off all the money that they make. They look at it like, hey, I'll get a 15-year mortgage. My tenants are paying my mortgage. I don't even care if it makes money. I don't need that money to live off of anyway. In 15 years, I have a free and clear asset that's worth no less than $400,000. That's one way to do things, right? What if you're not rich already or you don't have an overabundance of vertical income because you're not making enough money to put $100,000 down on a property? You got to get creative, right? So maybe you're buying a property where it qualifies for 100% financing. You get short-term financing. You maybe got your $50,000 together with your brother or your sister or your mom or your uncle. And your total outlay for that project was $32,000 at any given time. The property's worth $250,000 when it's all said and done, like we said. And now if I go to the bank or if I went to a commercial lender, they're going to give me anywhere from 70 to 80% on a cash out refinance on the property's current value because I've increased the property's value. That's forced appreciation, right? So if my total financing that I took out originally on this property was $150,000, my math skills aren't that strong. What's 150 into 250? Anybody? 60%. So if I'm getting a cash out refinance for 70 to 80%, I don't even need to max it out, which I would recommend you don't do, and that's absolutely necessary. I could pay off that $150,000 loan with a 70% LTV loan. I still get a little bit of money in my pocket. Ideally, if I'm doing this, I have tenants that are paying my mortgage. The property is servicing itself, right? Now I can go live my best life. But if I had to buy that with my own money and I'm putting 20% down or 25% down and the property is just cash flowing, that's great. But I can't go to the bank the next month and say, hey, that 25% I gave you guys last month, I need that back. So this is why people do buy, fix, and hold investing, right? This is, if this was an exit sale, let's say there was no 70 to 80% here, and I'm just selling the property for a profit, and I was out 150 plus expenses, maybe with my financing expenses, it came out to 175 in total cost for acquisition, renovation, holding costs, all that fun stuff. I sell it for 250. Maybe in some magical world I don't use a real estate agent and I list the property myself, so I have no real estate commissions to pay out. You figure take 2% off the top for my transfer tax. I would net about $70,000. That's why people flip houses, right? You could use somebody else's money to do this and not have to have all the money yourself. Are there any questions about how 100% financing works now? When I put out that 32, where did that 32 come from? Part of it was my closing costs, right? So that money I'm not getting back until I either sell the property or do exit financing and get my money back when I burn. But the other part of the money was money that I was putting out during the rehab process. So we said there was about 12K in closing costs there, and the other 20 was just my outlay at any given time during the rehab process. What's the last thing that happens during the rehab process? I'm getting a reimbursement for the money that I put into the property, right? So at the end of it, my actual cash outlay is going to be like 12 and some change, maybe 13, 14, right? All the rest of the money's back in my account. But when I go to pay that loan off, I have to pay back $150,000. Is that fair? That's why you could make yourself whole by doing a 70% cash out on that in that situation. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Don't disagree with me. Does it make sense?
No, it does.
My man, okay. When do I have equity? I mean, it depends. If I'm getting the property for a really great price, I may have equity as soon as I buy it because I maybe got the property for, cents on the dollar. And property values are already higher, but it was a really motivated seller. Someone's parents died and they left them the property and they just want to get rid of it and they don't want to be managing a property out of state because they live in California now. They're highly motivated because it's a couple that's splitting up and they need to sell the property and there's some deferred maintenance that they haven't bothered attending to, and now they don't have time to make the property retail ready in order to sell it for the highest and best possible price in the retail market. And so now they're letting it go, and there may be some juice that you can squeeze in there. So when I buy investment grade property, my ideal would be that the property's rented 100% of the time, all the time. But has anyone in here ever rented a place and moved out and there wasn't another tenant moving in right behind you?
Yeah.
Guess what? That can happen to you too as a landlord, right? So you have to account for a vacancy. What's a typical vacancy percentage that you account for? 5%, right? So that means you take your rents for the year, your gross rents, you just take 5% off the top. There's going to be a month here and there where I just don't have somebody in here. During turnover, maybe we got to get the unit ready for somebody else. I'm just not going to have anybody in there. What are other things that you have to account for? If the heater breaks in your house that you own as an investment property, who's responsible for it? You are. So you want to have a certain amount of expenses, ideally tucked away. This is why it's not a bad idea if you have stable W-2 income or you have a business that's bringing in income to not quit everything and go into real estate full time. Because until you get to the point where your real estate investments are passively covering all of your expenses in life, you may need that W-2 income to live off of because your real estate investments aren't self-sustaining. Maybe you got to dip into your money. One of my friends is an investor. He's also a real estate agent. I wish he would sell more houses, but that's just how life goes. He called me one day and I was like, hey man, it's 9 o'clock at night, it's past your bedtime, what are you doing up? And he was like, yeah man, one of my tenants just called me. Their unit's flooding in my triplex. I said, their unit's flooding? He was like, yeah. I was like, that's not good. He's like, yeah, I don't even know how they got my phone number. They're supposed to be calling the property management company, but I got to figure it out. So the next call he had to make was to get them accommodations for the night, right? He was like, hey, I know you got this app. It's not working on my phone. I need to find these people a hotel room like right now. Can you help me out? Because I was like, I thought it was just like, hey man, he's checking on me. No, he just want to use me for that. It's okay, I'm not bitter. So those are the types of phone calls that you can get, right? That's why you hire a property management company, but that's still your financial responsibility, even if you have somebody else managing it. So you want to account for those expenses. What are the other reasons why, when we talk about planning for the downside, Gary, what are some of the other reasons why we leave that room? If I'm doing a rehab and my final sale price is going to be $1 million, and the property obeys the 65% rule. So I'm buying it for $400,000. My rehab costs $250,000, and it's going to sell for a smooth $1 million. Bless up, right? Now, this looks very sexy, right? But what happens on projects when you get larger? The problems are larger, right? So you may say, hey, you know what, Mark? I'll buy this property if it's for sale for $500,000 or $600,000. I can still make it happen. In fact, I often get phone calls like that. Hey man, I got this great deal. At the end of the phone call, I explained to them that it's not really a great deal. But when you have larger amounts, people are willing to take smaller margins. But the reason why we try to operate from that 65% rule is you have surprises. Hey, my crew was going down in the basement today, and they went to clear out the plumbing line, and actually the plumbing line is broken out to the street, so we have to dig up the entire sidewalk in front of the house and the street, and we have to lay a new plumbing line. Yep, that happens. Hey, I plan to convert this property to a 4-unit. We had a community meeting. Me and my mom got into a screaming match with the community members, and they didn't approve our plans. You thought you had a property that you were going to be turning into 4 cash flowing units, and now it's got to stay as a single or a duplex. That's very different numbers. Hey, Mark, during the process, my contractor flew to Venezuela, and I haven't heard from him in 3 months. He told me he was going to be back in a week or 2. It happened to one of my friends. So we want to account for contingency in that rehab budget. So if we say, hey, the rehab is going to cost us $250,000, what's the lender saying? No, it's not. Take that $250, we're going to put 10% on top, $275. And in fact, when you get rehab budgets that big, most funders are going to make that more like 15, 20%. Because there's an expectation. You want to expect the best, but plan for the worst, right? Because what happens if you plan for the best and the best doesn't happen? You get these phone calls. Hey, Mark, I got a client that's looking to get a loan. They want to refinance a property they own. Oh, okay. Tell me a little bit about it. This is a real phone call. So they have a property that's going to sell for $1.25 million. Nice. Sounds sexy. Bigger loan amounts. I like it. Talk more to me. Property is going to sell for $1.25 million. Hey, is there any debt on the property currently? Yeah, he's got a loan. How much is the loan that he has? $780,000. Woo. Woo. Okay. All right. How much does he need to finish the work? Probably like 100. Okay, cool. Send me over that scope of work, right? Scope of work comes over 133. Is anybody good at math? What's that, $913,000? Right? What's 913 into 1.25, guys? $73%. So from a lending standpoint, we're looking at this deal, and what do you think we're thinking? Hell no. Hell no. Why is that? You don't have a good deal if you were buying this property today. We want to see some skin in the game from it, right? We'd say, like, hey, we could do this. You got to come with 10% down, maybe. It could work. This would probably be more like 15% because of the purchase price is so high, right? We could do that. You put 15% down. We'll give you the money for the rest of the money for the purchase. Still not bad. You're getting really good leverage. You're able to get the money for the rehab, 133, reimbursed as a draw. And then when you're done and you sell it, your margins aren't great, but you're selling the property for 1.25. Maybe your cousin's a real estate agent. They'll give you a break on the price, right? But you already have a loan out on this property. You've already shown yourself to be irresponsible with somebody else's money. That's why you're coming to me a year and 2 months after you took out the initial loan looking for a refinance. This is what happens when people don't plan for contingency. I can guarantee you the lender that they used to get this initial loan, I'm familiar with them, they didn't check them. Or the person completely underestimated what was going on in the property. They had some surprises. They were already running with a deal that was slim margins to begin with, and they just said, hey, we're going to push through. They were thinking about that exit sale price. It sounds really sexy, 1.25 million, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then they get in there and boom, surprises. I've seen rehabbers do this. Take out multiple loans, use some of the money from one project to pay for another property that's not associated with this loan. And then you have a conversation where you're like, hey man, I saw that you took out that loan. Like, what happened to the money? The property looks like it's not even halfway done, but you used all the rehab money. Yeah, man, you know, I was trying to finish this other one up, and then the other one, you know, it got crazy, and I'm out here in the world right now. Please help me, right? So one of the things that's going to be very important for everybody in here, if this is new to you, I need you guys to get really good at evaluating deals, right? Because what happens if you go in on a deal and you're highly leveraged like this person is, and all of a sudden the market drops 10%? You know what I mean by that? The market drops, that means retail prices drop 10% from where they are now. So that price that was selling for 1.25 million is now selling for 10 and some change. You already into it for 780. You still need 133 to finish it. Even if somebody was crazy enough to give you this money, you've now spent almost all of your money that you could sell the property for on the acquisition and rehab. You're now struggling to break even on a $1 million deal. That's scary, right? I'm also going to give you guys some hacks. If you're borrowing other people's money, and this isn't like an end-all be-all, it's just a way to live your life. If I plan on using other people's money to buy real estate, investment-grade properties, and leverage their money, as opposed to having 100% of the money myself, I should plan on having 25 to 30% of the money needed for a project. If it's my first time ever, I may even want to have more reserves than that, 30 to 35%. Why is that? In case stuff happens, right? When we were doing our rehab last year on Lime Kiln, we had cabinets that needed to be ordered 3 weeks before they were going to be installed. We ordered the cabinets, they showed up, they were the wrong cabinets. Is the lender that we got the loan from going to say, hey man, that's okay baby, I'm going to give you this money anyway? Materials aren't even installed in the property, we can't reimburse you. It's unfortunate. So we had to have money in case stuff happens, right? If you're running through a project and you're trying to get in and out quickly and you got to get stuff going and maybe you have to order materials that are going to be installed when the property's finished, but you're still in the middle of framing, you can't tell your contractor, or maybe you can, it just depends on your life, hey, I'm going to need you to float this, you know, put it on your account until I get my reimbursement from the funder. That's a rough conversation to have if y'all didn't have it up front, right? So general rule, 30 to 35% if it's your first time. If you're doing deals or if you're doing what I call lipstick on a pig rehabs, right? You have a property that's already got good bones, it doesn't need much, you're running through doing cosmetic, maybe getting it up to rental grade, you can get away with having less cash reserves. But generally, we're going to give you 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 leverage on your money. He said during the loan process, when you're putting together the scope of work, does it need to be a licensed contractor? That depends on the funder. Some funders, they want to see the contractor's insurance, their license. They want to see that they're in good standing with the state. I got one funder, they even want to see that the person doesn't have any employees. If they do, they got to show that they have workman's comp insurance. And then I have other funders that are just like, I don't even care. I'm never going to meet this person anyway. You're the one that's financially responsible for the deal. Now, for you as an investor, does it make sense to have somebody who's licensed? Obviously, right? Especially if it's in an area where there's a lot of development going on. You don't want to show up and have that L&I letter on your door. That's a sad face, right? That's happened to friends of mine that are doing investments, and they have licensed contractors working, you know? Nicole will gladly share this. She had a situation where the L&I inspector advised her on what permits to pull. She pulled the permits, then they still violated her. She said, what happened here? Yeah, you didn't pull the right one. You told me which one to pull. It happens, right? So that's in case stuff happens. So the best way you can protect your downside, obviously, you work with a licensed contractor. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, sometimes, depending on the neighborhood you're in, you can't close the door, get busy, you know. Surprise, hey, look, what you guys doing here? Oh, we just painting a little bit, you know. Just put a little fresh paint up. Like, really, it looks like everything's brand new. Nah, it's just a little paint. You know, we maintain it really well. FHA loans are insured by the federal government. So that means there's a lot of rules, right? So you have the rules that the government puts out on how those loans are made and underwritten and all that fun stuff. And you have another set of rules on how those loans are disclosed to borrowers, because that's a consumer-based loan. And then individual lenders may have their own rules on top of that. If your friend went through the loan process and was paying attention to the paperwork, they would have seen that, because that person by law has to disclose those things to them. That's a little bit scary that happened. But yeah, the beautiful thing about these types of loans is that there are no rules. The scary thing about these types of loans is that there are no rules. I have one funder that will close on a loan in 24 to 48 hours. Say, hey, Mark, it's Wednesday night. I got to close on this property on Friday, or we're going to lose the deal. All right, hey, you know what the deal is. Send me over the documents. But when you go to closing, you have to sign a title in lieu of. Do you know what that is? Okay? Deed in lieu means if at any time I decide I don't want you to have this property anymore, it's mine. That's me, right? In fact, I had one title company tell me, hey, man, I hear everything you're saying. You can't sign this at our office. You listen, we'll do the loan, we'll do the closing. You can't sign this at our office. They got to sign this somewhere else. So we had to have a mobile notary go to where he was at and sign it afterwards so it could be recorded with the county. That's just, you know, how he gets down. But if he's willing to give you money with 48 hours notice and nobody else is going to give you money, sometimes you got to dance with the devil. If you're getting a loan for short-term financing, right? That's what these projects are. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. We'll usually maybe go up to like 18 months if it's like absolutely needed. But longer than that, it's like a little bit scary what's going on, right? Especially for residential real estate projects. We're talking about somewhere in that 8 to 12% pocket. I've seen as high as 13 and 14 in this market. Higher than that is scary, but it also depends on your situation. As we talked about before, when lenders are making the decision on whether or not to give you the money, they're looking at a bunch of different factors, right? What if you have a great deal, but your credit score is 450, right? You got to work hard to get that low. So, you know, they may be looking at you. Let's just call it what it is. You got to work hard to get that low, but I've seen it. So if you have a 450 credit score, but you got a great deal and you have some assets, maybe the lender will say, hey, you know what? I'll give you this loan, but I'm going to have to tax you for it. I want to see more money down. You know, we're maybe not doing 100% financing for that. It's going to be like 15, 20% down, right? Interest rate might be a little bit higher because it's just a different appetite. The person that's going to give you that loan, they're going to be a little bit more predatory, as they should be, right? And then the points up front, that lender fees typically due at closing, because that's how the lender makes money, is usually going to be between 2 and 3 points in this market. Somebody's charging you much more than 3 points, I would be nervous. And you should have already come and seen me, so I wouldn't do that to you. But have a plan, right? So if you're looking at deals that they obey the 65, 70% rule, meaning your purchase and rehab costs do not exceed 65% or 70% of what the property is going to be worth after improvements, hey, how you doing? Let's talk. As a loan officer, as a lender, we get paid a percentage of what you're borrowing. If somebody's borrowing $500,000 or $50,000, the paperwork's the same. In fact, it's usually harder to do the $50,000 loan because the person is usually a little bit less familiar with the process, right? Maybe their stuff's not all together. I got to give them a little bit more hand-holding. So if somebody brought me a really great deal and they were like, hey, Mark, I need to borrow $55,000, $60,000, I'd be willing to do it, especially if you're a BTS member, because I always got love for you guys. But if you're telling me, hey, man, I got a property I'm going to buy for $40 and it needs $20,000 worth of work, and it's going to be worth $70,000, forget my number. I'm serious. Anybody else? So that's an excellent question for apartment buildings. So once you go above 4 residential units, you're now in the multifamily space. That's usually a different appetite. 2 reasons. The people that would buy that property, if you don't pay back the lender, are going to be different people typically than people that would buy a 1, 2, 3, or 4 unit property. They can't even qualify for the same type of financing for that property, typically. So the funders that do those types of loans, they have a different appetite as well. they're usually looking for people that are a little bit more cash reserves. So I'd say expect to have actually, 25 to 30% of the purchase price available for the down payment. As Gary was talking about earlier, you have more units, you have more expenses. So also have some reserves. You won't want to be piecing together your 25% and be like, hey, Mark, I got a great deal. It's this 18-unit apartment building. That's not going to work, right? So it's just going to be more cash intensive of a process. So if you're getting financing for new construction, generally people do new construction because the margins are better, right? If I'm buying a property, I'm making improvements to it, I'm going to sell it for a profit. It's less work intensive and capital intensive, but the margins are generally going to be slimmer than if I have a piece of land, I'm building a house from the ground up, I'm going to sell it for a much bigger spread. Because of that, it is a more capital intensive process. Generally, if you own the lot free and clear, we'll fund 100% of the construction costs off the rip. It's still going to be dispersed as a reimbursement, but we'll give you all the money because we don't have to worry about it obeying the 65% rule. If it doesn't, you shouldn't be doing it. I would, be questioning your sanity if you were like, hey, I got this great new construction project, it's 80% cost. What? Right? But the caveat is if you don't own the land already, I'm not saying it's impossible, but most funders aren't going to give you the purchase funds and the rehab money, at least not all of it. They're going to want to see some skin in the game from you. So they say, hey, you're buying the lot for $50,000, we'll give you half of that, and then we'll give you the build money. And then you got to get the property, shovel ready. We're not going to cover the money for that. How do you get started in real estate if this is all foreign to you? There's some new faces here, right? Be in rooms like this one. When I first started coming to BTS, I was already working on loans all the time, so I knew what was going on as far as the financing side. But even for me, and I learn stuff every day, if you have a full-time career and this is something that you want to learn, I promise you a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, people are still going to need a place to live. So you can always make money in real estate either as somebody who's creating homes that people can buy, or you're creating, places for people to rent. But you got to learn the language because a lot of times you go to somebody who's got high competence, and I'm not even going to put myself in that basket yet, even though I'm strive for that. But if you go to somebody who's highly competent in real estate and you try to burn them up and be an asshole and say, hey, I got a bunch of questions for you, I want to take you out to lunch. If they're doing well, I promise you they can afford their own lunch. They don't really want that, right? They don't want that. What they want is people that, maybe they can add value to. But if you don't know anything, they're giving you ABC 1, 2, 3 of real estate, you don't want to burn them up for that. That's the thing that a lot of people don't really internalize when they get into a new environment. They want to go to the person that knows the most and ask them the most questions. Maybe not do that yet, right? Maybe figure out where things are and then get around those people so that you can ask better questions and really be able to get the juice from them. Is that fair? Anybody have a really, really good question they want to ask before we shut it down? No? All right, get out of here.